So my main theory or my main question that I wanted to ask was, does the perception of social support and the level of self-efficacy differs for traditional college students as opposed to non-traditional college students? So when I was reading through this, and I was looking at my different options for dependent variables and independent variables, they stuck out to me for the simple fact of I can only imagine how it is to go back to school as a non-traditional student, especially in regards to social support. And me myself, I'm a traditional college student, and while I have a good amount of social support, it's not like a fair large amount. And my level of self efficacy, I have pretty good confidence in being able to complete a task or anything in that regards. But still, I wondered how that differed for somebody who is returning back to school, either after taking a break, having a child, anything of that such. So that was the research question that I focused on. Let me repeat it again. Does the perception of social support and the level of self-efficacy differs for traditional college students as opposed to non-traditional college students? So my hypothesis was traditional students' level of self-efficacy and perception of social support differs in comparison to non-traditional students' level of self-efficacy and perceived social support. So within my study, I just mainly wanted to see if there was a if there was a difference. But also within my study, I also went into how it differed. So yes. So the participants that was used in the participants that was used in this study was all between the ages of, I believe, 18 and 27 or 25. They were all between that age. On top of the fact they was in between those ages, we also had to place a pinpoint on. I also had to place a pinpoint on the right way to define what could be considered a traditional or non-traditional student. So with that being said, it was 85 undergraduate students participating within the study from LSUA, or Louisiana State University of Alexandria. Um, And basically, how it went was they all were psychology majors and all undergraduate. And I had 50 of them, which were female, and I had 25 that were males. And all of them, again, were considered psychology majors at LSUA, or Louisiana State University. While 63 of the participants were quote unquote non traditional, I say quote unquote non traditional because everybody has a different definition. When I was researching, I noticed that everybody had a different definition they were using in regard to what a non traditional student was or a traditional student was. So, with that, in that regards, it was 63 non traditional students, quote unquote, and 62 quote unquote traditional students. Now, what I do want to go ahead and do is define what I viewed, what I came to be the definition of traditional. So for traditionals, for tradition non-traditional, it was an age group, a demographic, a part of a specific age group. Um, so anybody that was that was in their mid to late 20s and returning to school, having to take a break anytime between. I considered non-traditional, or I defined as non-traditional, and anyone that was in their late teens, and went straight into college after graduating from high school was what I considered a traditional college student. So, the main thing that came about when I was doing my study, especially with a lot of the research areas that I was using, was that I wanted to see how the independent variables, which are again the traditional versus non-traditional students, and how again it is impacted by social support, and how not only how it's impacted, they're impacted by social support, but if there was a difference between the two, because you would think that because a traditional student is a traditional student, they would gain more support from their peers, I guess you could say, or from their parents or their support system in comparison to students that's considered non-traditional, who are not, most of the time, older. Um, and again, so what I wanted to do was, I'm going to go ahead and show the results for self-efficacy. What I was aiming to do was, I conducted a MANOVA statistical test. Also, I do want to say that I used a survey placed within a Google form that was sent out to all the participants, explaining everything with the study. Also, I used for my the self-efficacy study, or the self-efficacy, for the self-efficacy, I guess you can say, part of the study, in order to get a scale, like a measure on that. It was, the scale that was used was general self-efficacy scale, which has 10 items, which the main goals of each item is to get an idea of how each individual views their ability to accomplish something, or to do something in any regards, or also to like from any type of bounce back from any type of setback, anything like that. That is what, when the survey or the scale was developed in 1995 by, um, one moment, Sir Razer in Jerusalem. I did read that off a sheet of paper due to me not wanting to mess up their names, and B, not knowing how to pronounce their names. And I had came down to the scoring by the sum of each item, a part of it. There was 10 questions and 77 participants, a part of the research, the research scale and studies of that such. So basically what I end up coming to the realization is, or the results showed, that non-traditional students scored higher, scored higher, on their level of self-efficacy than traditional students. So the best way to kind of break that down is that for the self-efficacy, the non-traditional students scored an average of 33.4. The traditional students uh scored an average of 29.4, which I converted over to the percentages, which you're trying to see in this graph, which again shows that non-traditional students have a higher level, in regards to self-efficacy and their belief of how they can achieve something or commit to something in regards to that. And then for the traditional students, which was again 29.4, they scored lower on down the bar. I do believe that that does support what I believe to be my hypothesis, which I'll go back to, that it was going to be uh, um, a differ between the two, and I'm not quite surprised about the fact that it leaned for the self-efficacy part. It leaned more towards the non-traditional students, but I'm going to move on towards the social support. Excuse me. For the social support, there was an average of 5.1 in social support level once I had calculated the averages of each one from the quantitative surveys that were given or that were shown. It was a 5.1 in social support for non-traditional students, and it was a 5.6 in social support for traditional students. I contribute that to the fact of, again, social support compared to traditional students versus non-traditional students. I do think their age kind of plays a role in it as well. because for social support, 9 times 10 you're coming straight from on a general sense, what you would imagine it be, you are coming straight from um probably home. So you have that entire system behind you, while for the individuals who are going back to school, while you do have social support, I feel like that push to go back to school is predominantly based off the the feeling of you being able to achieve it. Now, none of this is fact. All of this is opinion, which does not help nothing. But it's 12:05. So, but my results did support it because there was a difference. Um, so yes, ma'am, was that. And now for the conclusion area was when was looking at the previous research, what I noticed was the fact that other researchers when touching on these areas, other researchers I noticed had it kind of limit my study due to the fact of one moment. It kind of limit my study due to the fact of how the certain components they specified on compared to the components I specified on. I noticed that a lot of researchers, such as if I was to place a large emphasis on one, I would go with maybe the 20. Go back to my notes. My 2014 one, and my 20 2007 one. Those two compared the motivation between traditional and non-traditional students, but they also place the emphasis on remote learning students as well, which limit my personal the impact of my story, my personal study, for the simple fact of it had the extra component of the remote learning students, which basically means that the results was not specific to those two areas, but I still was able to use the traditional non-traditional area of that study. But again, it was limited due to the fact that they placed the emphasis also on remote learning students. Now, the 2014 study, that study was about trying to find a clear definition for non-traditional students, while that aided in my coming to a conclusion in regards to how I wanted to define non-traditional students. Also was limited because when you talk about non-traditional students, it talked about it in a different way. And you can also look at it on other studies that I had used. You have 2011 one that basically examined how different non-traditional students interact within their university and how that impacted their academic performance. So you have parts of that where it was like it also limited it. It helped, but also limited because their research normally went beyond that, while mine only focused on the area of how traditional and non-traditional students differ in regards to social support and self-efficacy. Those place more of an emphasis on engagement, the relationships, the distance learning, all you can see within that. But the conclusion was non-traditional students scored higher in self-efficacy than traditional students, indicating stronger academic skills, while non-traditional students had lower averages for social support than traditional students, which indicated support from peers as a crucial piece for high achievement. So, what I'm going to do is I had what I wanted to do was get to the point where was what I had examined. Um, Go back to that to place the emphasis on how that could be changed and bettered in regards to how it could be bettered for future research. So I do feel like a more in-depth study could be conducted so that you can better understand the quantitative data that was brought forward within the study. Um, that way you can conduct more research on the different and more specific experiences instead of just a general broad area of it. You can go more into the unique experiences for both traditional and non-traditional students and how those experiences differs for each. Again, to better understand the data, the quantitative data that was presented. Another future research idea that I came up with was to diversify the sample that is used within the research study, get more participants from other universities. Let's say get more students from maybe schools or universities within the north instead of just the south. Basically, that goes back to the geographical locations and things like that. Plus, the university was a small one, so I feel like it on a bigger university, in a bigger university setting, I feel like I believe that you can gather even more information to specify things. Um, but also different academic programs because again, all of the participants within the study were psychology majors. So I wonder how that would have differed with other academic programs such as business, computer science, things of that such, and how far the results from this story could be applied beyond those specific samples. And lastly, I would be interested in doing more research in regards to more specified samples or more specified factors, to look more into factors that do contribute to the self efficacy and social support of certain student classifications. If hope I'm saying that well. And in regards to what I mean about that, um, excuse me. When I say more factors, I mean more so placing better emphasis on the responsibilities they have outside of work and school. Maybe like their family responsibilities. Maybe if they're a mother, father, a parent in general, or if they're taking care of a child, a guardian. Um, Also, if you know they're in the financial situation they are in, because depending on the financial situation they are in, it can also potentially influence how one feels about not only their self efficacy but the social support they receive. Um, Especially when you look at it from an employment standpoint, they may have to work more hours in order to bring more income in, which limits what they can do in regards to their academics. So from there, I do want to place again the emphasis of my variables were my two main variables were dependent variables were social support and self efficacy. And the main independent variables was traditional students versus non-traditional students. The key findings, um, the key findings from it was that um, non-traditional students has a higher average when it comes to self-efficacy and their level of self-efficacy when compared to traditional college students. But for traditional college students, they have more social support than compared to non-traditional students. Thank you. My name is Khai'lya Piper, and this is the study that I conducted in regards to non-traditional and traditional students and self-efficacy and social support and their perception of both. Thank you.